Why would you decide to take the economy over the cliff and put the economy through the damage that's going to cause because you are unwilling to agree to a modest increase on rates for 2% of Americans? It seems deeply implausible as a strategy, and it should be avoidable.
Well, that was Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner there addressing the likelihood of solving the fiscal cliff yesterday in Washington, and really the conundrum that is facing both Republicans and Democrats on taxes. And as the clock ticks on the nation's budget crisis, I'm joined now by the newly reelected Congressman Scott Rigell of Virginia, who, as you know, in a symbolic, or you may or may not know, in a symbolic gesture, gave back 15% of his salary to go towards the budget deficit. Now, that gesture piqued the interest of billionaire Warren Buffett, who matched his contribution and invited the congressman to Omaha. And the congressman and I traveled out to Omaha back in January of this year to talk about the fiscal situation. It has only, Congressman, gotten worse and worse. Now, you just heard Treasury Secretary Geithner say, look, we are fighting over basically a very small issue, which is raising taxes on 2% of wealthy Americans. Would you accept some type of deal on the fiscal cliff that would increase tax rates on the wealthy?
Well, Betty, thank you for having me on the show. And I think what's important here is that we also look at the spending side. And what I'll be looking for, and what I'm certainly open to and am advocating for, is a comprehensive agreement, one that addresses both the revenue side and the spending side. I did, as you know, distance myself from the Norquist pledge, the ATR pledge, because I think it's irreconcilable with meaningful tax reform. So I am a Republican who's ready to come to an agreement. I think we've got to move quickly. The consequences of not are so severe for our country that it really threatens every Republican, Democrat, Independent, and folks who are fed up with all the parties.
Americans are very much fed up, Congressman. And so what I'm hearing from you is, look, you may entertain some sort of a tax rate increase if it did come also with some significant entitlement cuts, right?
Well, yes. Well, the 3-to-1 ratio, I think, is a good point to pivot off of. And one thing that I would encourage the leadership to do, and of course the White House as well, is to begin a discussion on what a tax code yields as a percent of our GDP, and the same on the spending side. I rarely hear that. In fact, I just don't recall hearing that. All I hear is, well, taxes are too low or too high. I think we need to look for historical context. This is helpful to Americans. When I distanced myself from the Americans for Tax Reform pledge, the first thing I did was I went back to the district and I got out a number line and I just walked through with our wonderful district why I came to the decision that I came to. And when Americans are given good information, they make good decisions. So I'm confident that we can come. Yes?
No, go ahead. So you're confident?
Well, I'm confident that to the extent that we can, I think, educate folks in the district where we need to go as a country. I have made it clear that I think this tax code, from a historic standpoint, is less than where we've been on our, well, we haven't been at this particular yield, which is 16.9% since 1959. Now, this is a mathematical reality. And I'm a businessman. That's who the 2nd District sent up to serve them in Washington. Right. Now, on the expense side, we're way over on expenses at around 24% of GDP. So both revenues have to come up, principally by growing our economy, elimination of loopholes, but spending needs to come down, and that's what I haven't seen from the president or from our Democrat leadership here in Congress are specific plans on how to reduce spending. Well,
and to your point, overall, Congressman, where you say that the message is just not getting out to the American people, I thought there was an interesting study that was done by the Pew Research Center where they found, and I think we've got some of these stats here, they found that 51% of Americans believe that we will go over the fiscal cliff. They have very little trust in the lawmakers to solve the situation. But I thought it was even more interesting that 53%, Congressman, would blame the Republicans for going over the cliff. What do you think of that?
Well, I think what's important is that we lead, and that we put bold plans for the future of our children and grandchildren. I really believe the foundation of our republic is at risk. It troubles me to to share that with you, but I've said this in our district. I think we need to be very careful to go where the facts lead us. And for me, as an American and as a businessman and indeed as a Republican, I believe what it means to me to be a Republican is that we pay our bills, and this tax code yields around 17%. I think that can be proved mathematically, empirically, and again, we haven't been there since 1959. But I need some help from our Democrat friends.
You're saying the tax code is 17% of our GDP, right? I just want to clarify that for our viewers.
Correct. If you just take, it's real simple. You just take total tax revenues for the last 11 years and divide it by total GDP for that same period. And I have the view and the belief, and I'm convinced of this, that represents an average. There were some really good times in those years. There were some times of severe really difficult economy like we are in now.
Right.
But overall, it yields around 17%. And again, our 50-year average is about 18.5%.
Okay, so we are, well, about 18, so we're almost there then. We're around that.
Well, right, that's my point. So, I mean, principally, this is a reduction of expenditures, and that's why I can sign up with a 3-to-1 average. That ratio of reducing spending to revenue going up. And again, I do want to point out, Betty, it's so important that there are about 30 job bills that are now in the Senate. And as an entrepreneur, I know that they would unleash the great job-producing potential of the American entrepreneur. I know there's 18,000 jobs just in my own district that are bottled up because of the ban on offshore drilling and harvesting of our resources off the coast of Virginia. That troubles me.
And certainly a lot of issues on that, and a lot of ways that we could instantly create jobs that are just being backlogged. But Congressman, just really quickly before I let you go, as I mentioned, you have this relationship with Warren Buffett. Have you talked to him since your victory? I know you mentioned something that you wrote a letter to him or a note.
Well, I just wrote him a note a couple of days ago just to let him know that I'd won and told him that I appreciated his support. And I'm hopeful, and I'm quite sure that we'll talk here soon. But he's really busy, and I can tell you, Betty, coming through this very challenging election in Virginia too, it just took me a few days to catch my breath. But we're back at work. We're ready to go. The sun's shining in Washington. I'm an optimist by nature.
You are indeed, Congressman. Thank you so much, and I'm sure you will be hearing back from Warren Buffett. I'll want to get an update on that. Thank you so much, Congressman Scott Rigell from Virginia.
Thank you, Betty.
Coming up, the Big Apple. After Superstorm Sandy, we're going to ask one of the city's biggest property players what can be done to prevent